Brothers and sisters of the global South, we are witnessing yet another chapter in the endless story of Western economic imperialism. Today it comes disguised as trade policy. Tomorrow it will wear another mask, but the purpose remains unchanged: to keep the developing world dependent, subservient, and profitable for their machine. Donald Trump's declaration of 100% tariffs on pharmaceutical imports is not simply about medicine. It is about control. It is about ensuring that every pill, every cure, every hope for healing must pass through American hands and fill American pockets. They want to be the gatekeepers of life itself. When Trump says America first, he means Africa last. When he demands manufacturing return to American soil, he is declaring that our sick must wait, our children must suffer, and our elderly must die so that American shareholders can profit. For decades, India has served as the pharmacy of the world. Not out of charity, but out of necessity. When Western pharmaceutical giants priced life, saving medicines beyond the reach of ordinary people, India stepped forward. When patents became weapons of oppression rather than tools of innovation, India broke them. When the West said, "Pay or die," India answered, "Live, and pay what you can." This is why Trump targets India now. Not because their medicines are inferior, they are often identical to Western brands. Not because they are unsafe, they meet the same standards. He targets India because they refuse to obey the rules of pharmaceutical colonialism. India's pharmaceutical industry represents what the West fears most: proof that the global South can innovate, manufacture, and compete without begging for scraps from the master's table. When Indian companies like Sun Pharma, Dr. Reddy's, and Lupin export billions of dollars worth of medicines, they are not just selling pills. They are selling hope to nations abandoned by Western greed. Listen to how the West speaks of free markets when it benefits them. When their corporations want to flood our markets, they demand open borders, no tariffs, and competition. But when we compete and win, suddenly the rules change. Suddenly it becomes about national security. Suddenly protectionism is rebranded as patriotism. The hypocrisy is the same everywhere. They preach democracy while backing dictators who serve their interests. They speak of human rights while bombing villages. They promote free trade while imposing sanctions on those who dare chart their own path. Trump's tariffs on medicines are no different from his tariffs on kitchen cabinets and furniture. They are the desperate flailing of an empire watching its economic dominance slip away. Unable to compete fairly, America hides behind walls of protectionism, calling it strength when it is, in truth, weakness. This moment presents Africa with a choice that will define generations. Do we continue to survive on crumbs from the West, or do we build our own alternatives? For too long, African nations have been spectators in global trade disputes. We watch as India and America clash over pharmaceutical markets, while our people die of treatable diseases. We watch China and the West fight for influence, while our resources are stripped and our sovereignty auctioned to the highest bidder. But this pharmaceutical war offers us an opportunity to break free from Western medical colonialism. We must stand with India, not as junior partners begging for favors, but as equals demanding our right to affordable health care for our people. Burkina Faso will lead by example. We will negotiate preferential trade agreements with Indian pharmaceutical companies. We will reduce tariffs, not eliminate them, for we are not a charity, but set fair rates that reflect genuine partnership. We will grant Indian companies secure access to African markets while ensuring that life-saving medicines reach our people at prices they can afford. And this is only the beginning. We must think beyond importing medicines. We must build. We will invite Indian pharmaceutical companies to establish manufacturing facilities here in Africa, not to exploit our cheap labor, but to transfer technology, train our scientists, and grow our own pharmaceutical industry. Imagine African-made medicines produced with Indian technology, healing African bodies at African prices. Imagine our children not dying from preventable diseases simply because treatment costs more than their families earn in an entire year. Imagine hospitals filled with medicines we produce ourselves, free from the arbitrary pricing of Western pharmaceutical monopolies. This pharmaceutical alliance can become the foundation for broader cooperation between Africa and India. If we can work together to secure affordable healthcare, why not also pursue affordable technology? Why not fair trade in agriculture? Why not cooperation in education, infrastructure, and sustainable development? The West has had centuries to prove that its system benefits all, yet what we have witnessed is exploitation, extraction, and enrichment of the few at the expense of the many. It is time to try something different. South-South cooperation is not merely an economic strategy, it is a declaration of independence. It is a refusal to accept a world where geography determines destiny, where being born in the global South condemns you to a lifetime of struggle while others prosper from your suffering. Every day we delay. More of our people die from diseases that could be treated if medicines were affordable. Every month we hesitate. Western pharmaceutical companies tighten their grip on global health. Every year we wait for others to solve our problems. We become more dependent, more vulnerable, more expendable in their calculations. Trump's tariffs are not a crisis, they are a wake-up call. They remind us that survival cannot be built on the mercy of others. They prove that those who control medicines control our lives, and those who control our lives control our destiny. Burkina Faso calls on every African nation to join us in this pharmaceutical revolution. Let us create an African pharmaceutical alliance that partners with India and other global South nations committed to affordable healthcare. Together we can pool our purchasing power to negotiate fairer prices, share the costs of research and development, and build regional manufacturing hubs capable of supplying the entire continent. We can train a new generation of African pharmacologists, chemists, and medical researchers who serve African people, not Western profits. Most importantly, we must break the psychological chains that make us believe we are incapable of producing our own solutions. We will prove that African hands can manufacture medicines as effectively as any others. We will demonstrate that African minds can innovate just as brilliantly as those in New York, London, or Paris. This is not about hatred of the West. It is about love for our people. It is not about revenge for past exploitation. It is about preventing future exploitation. It is not about isolation. It is about engaging with the world as equals, not as servants. India has shown us the way. Despite pressure, sanctions, and constant Western interference, they built a pharmaceutical industry that serves not only their own people, but people across the global South. They have proven that it is possible to place human life above profit margins. Now it is our turn. Africa must rise, speak, and act with courage. We must turn this crisis into an opportunity, this challenge into a catalyst for lasting change. The choice is ours. Remain dependent consumers of Western medicine, or become proud producers of our own solutions. Remain vulnerable to the whims of foreign powers, or build the resilience of self-reliance. Brothers and sisters, the revolution in global healthcare begins here, begins now, begins with us. When history records how Africa freed itself from medical colonialism, let it say that we stood with India not as dependents, but as partners in the struggle for pharmaceutical freedom. The sick deserve healing. The poor deserve dignity. Our people deserve more than crumbs from the master's table. It is time to set our own table, grow our own food, and determine our own destiny. We must recognize how we arrived at this moment, where a single man in Washington can endanger the health of billions with the stroke of a pen. This did not happen overnight. It is the outcome of decades of systematic economic colonization that began the moment political independence was declared across Africa. When our nations gained independence in the 1960s, we thought freedom meant the end of foreign control. We were mistaken. The colonial powers simply shifted tactics. Instead of military occupation, they imposed economic dependency. Instead of direct rule, they dictated structural adjustment programs. Instead of extracting our resources at gunpoint, they drained our wealth through unfair trade agreements and debt traps. The pharmaceutical industry became one of their sharpest weapons. They convinced us that only Western companies could produce quality medicines, flooded our markets with overpriced branded drugs, suppressed local production, and even patented remedies our ancestors had used for centuries, then sold them back to us at inflated prices. This is why India's rise as a pharmaceutical powerhouse unsettles them so deeply. India refused to accept that healing should be the privilege of the wealthy. When Western companies charged thousands of dollars for AIDS treatments, Indian firms produced the same medicines for a fraction of the cost. When cancer drugs were priced beyond reach, Indian manufacturers proved that life-saving treatment could be affordable without sacrificing quality. Look closely at how medical colonialism functions in Africa today. Western pharmaceutical companies conduct clinical trials on African patients, using our bodies to test their drugs. Yet when those treatments succeed, the same medicines are priced beyond the reach of the very people who made their development possible. They establish research centers in our universities, not to strengthen our capacity, but to exploit our genetic diversity and traditional knowledge. They patent our indigenous plants and healing practices, then claim ownership over remedies our grandmothers carried in memory and practice. Meanwhile, our hospitals remain understocked, and our people die from diseases that could be prevented or cured with medicines gathering dust in Western warehouses because the profit margins are deemed too low. This is not an accident. It is not a flaw of the market. It is the deliberate architecture of dependency, designed to keep African lives cheap while Western profits remain high. Trump's 100% tariffs reveal something important: the West's fear of the economic model India represents. For decades, we were told that quality manufacturing required Western expertise, Western capital, Western supervision. India shattered that illusion. Indian pharmaceutical companies did more than copy Western drugs. They innovated, streamlined processes, reduced costs, and often met or exceeded the quality standards of their Western rivals. They proved that brown hands could manufacture medicines just as effectively as white hands. They showed that developing nations could thrive in high-tech industries without becoming subordinates to Western corporations. And more threatening still for Western interests, India began to export this model. They shared technology, offered training, formed joint ventures, and built production networks that bypassed Western intermediaries. This is what terrifies Trump and the corporations behind him. Not that India produces medicine, but that India has demonstrated there is an alternative to Western pharmaceutical dominance. Every dollar spent on Indian medicines is a dollar not flowing into Western coffers. Every patent India challenges weakens the legal scaffolding that sustains medical monopolies. Trump's pharmaceutical tariffs are only the beginning. They are the blueprint for how the West will respond to any industry where global South nations compete successfully. Today it is medicines. Tomorrow it may be textiles, electronics, automotive parts, or any sector that threatens Western market share. The pattern is already visible. China faces tariffs on nearly everything it exports. Indian IT services face visa restrictions. African agricultural products run into arbitrary food safety barriers. Brazilian steel is accused of dumping. The message is consistent: compete with us, and you will be punished. But this posture reveals fragility, not strength. Empires in their prime do not need protectionist walls. They dominate through superior technology, efficiency, and innovation. When Rome ruled the world, it did not fear competition. It welcomed it because it knew it would win. Today's America builds walls because it knows it cannot compete on fair terms. This panic-driven protectionism creates unprecedented opportunities for Africa. As traditional trade routes are disrupted by tariff wars, alternative partnerships become not only possible but necessary. As Western markets close their doors, Southern markets must open theirs wider. Burkina Faso, therefore, proposes a comprehensive African healthcare partnership that goes beyond simply importing medicines. The first phase must focus on immediate relief, preferential tariff rates for essential medicines from India, fast-track approval for Indian pharmaceutical companies, collective bulk purchasing agreements to maximize African bargaining power, and the creation of emergency stockpiles of critical medicines to safeguard against future supply disruptions. Phase 2 must be about knowledge transfer. We need joint pharmaceutical universities to train the next generation of African medical scientists. We need technology transfer agreements that bring modern manufacturing techniques directly to African soil. We need research partnerships that focus on the diseases that disproportionately affect our populations. And we must secure intellectual property arrangements that guarantee African innovations serve African people, not foreign profits. Phase 3 must be about African pharmaceutical independence. That means building manufacturing facilities in every sub-region of the continent to reduce transportation costs and supply chain vulnerabilities. It means regional specialization, with different countries focusing on their comparative advantages. It means developing export capabilities that position Africa as a pharmaceutical supplier to the entire global south. It means establishing innovation hubs to develop treatments for tropical diseases that Western research consistently ignores. Consider the numbers that show the scale of this opportunity. Africa currently imports around 14 billion worth of pharmaceuticals each year, with most of it coming from Western corporations at prices inflated by monopoly premiums rather than production costs. Indian manufacturers regularly produce medicines at 60 to 80% lower prices without sacrificing quality. If Africa sourced just half of its pharmaceutical needs from India instead of the West, we would save between $4 and $6 billion annually. That is money currently flowing to shareholders in New York and London. Money that could instead remain in the global south, reinvested in our own development. And these savings are just the beginning. Billions of dollars could be redirected to fund medical schools, training African doctors for African patients, to build research institutes developing treatments for African diseases, to establish manufacturing facilities, creating African jobs for African workers, and to expand healthcare infrastructure that brings treatment closer to African communities. This is more than import substitution. This is economic transformation. This is more than trade diversification. This is liberation from medical colonialism. Our pharmaceutical alliance with India sends a powerful signal to the world: the era of unquestioned Western dominance is ending. When African nations stand shoulder to shoulder with Asian partners, we represent more than half of humanity. Our combined markets, resources, and human capital form a force that no empire can dismiss. Western leaders understand this arithmetic well. That is why they respond with hysteria to every example of south-south cooperation. They know their prosperity has always depended on our division. They know our unity threatens their supremacy. But our unity also offers them something valuable: a path toward genuine partnership instead of exploitative dominance. When Africa and India work together as equals, we create models of international cooperation rooted in mutual benefit rather than zero-sum competition. The West can choose to join this new paradigm as partners, or they can continue their doomed attempt to preserve hegemony through tariffs, sanctions, and military intimidation. The choice is theirs. But the outcome is inevitable. The future belongs to cooperation, not domination. Beyond economics and geopolitics lies a simple moral truth: every human being deserves access to life-saving medicine, no matter where they are born or how much money they have. This principle is not negotiable. It cannot be subjected to market forces, political calculations, or corporate profit margins. When Western pharmaceutical companies price medicines beyond the reach of African patients, they commit a crime against humanity. And when governments uphold this system through patent laws and trade agreements, they become accomplices to mass murder. When international institutions turn a blind eye to this injustice, they forfeit their moral authority. India has already shown the world that affordable medicine is possible without compromising quality or innovation. They have proven that healing can be profitable without being exploitative. They have demonstrated that pharmaceutical companies can thrive while treating medicine as a public good rather than a luxury reserved for the wealthy. Africa must not only embrace this model, but improve upon it. We must build pharmaceutical systems that place human need above shareholder greed. We must set research priorities that address the diseases afflicting the poor rather than the lifestyle conditions of the rich. We must establish manufacturing networks that serve communities, not corporations. The path ahead will not be easy. Western powers will not surrender their medical monopolies without resistance. They will unleash every weapon in their arsenal: economic pressure, political interference, media manipulation, and diplomatic isolation. They will question the safety of Indian medicines despite decades of proven success. They will raise concerns about quality control while ignoring the deaths their own price gouging has caused. They will invoke intellectual property rights, even as they steal traditional knowledge from indigenous communities. We must be ready for this resistance, and we must be stronger than their pressure. We must forge alliances that cannot be broken by threats or inducements. We must create facts on the ground that cannot be undone by political changes in Washington or London. Most importantly, we must never forget why we fight. Every time they demand we abandon this path, we must remember the children who died because their families could not afford treatment. Every time they tempt us with concessions to keep us dependent, we must remember the mothers forced to choose between buying medicine and feeding their families. Every time they question our resolve, we must remember that independence without healthcare sovereignty is no independence at all. History will judge us by how we respond to this moment. Future generations will ask whether we seized the chance to break free from medical colonialism or whether we remained comfortable in our chains. The choice before us is not merely economic or political. It is existential. Do we wish to leave our children a world where their health depends on the mercy of foreign corporations? Or will we build systems that enshrine healing as a human right? Burkina Faso chooses freedom. We choose partnership with India and with every nation committed to affordable healthcare for all. We choose to build rather than beg, to innovate rather than imitate, to lead rather than follow. We call upon every African leader, every healthcare worker, every parent who has watched a child suffer because treatment was out of reach, join us. The pharmaceutical revolution begins now. Together, we will prove that another world is possible. Together, we will show that prosperity can be shared rather than hoarded. Together, we will build a future where no one dies of poverty when cures already exist. This is our moment. This is our choice. This is our destiny.